I'll wait. All right. Start again. Welcome. And I'm Karen Gabler. I'm tri-chair of the racial justice team at the Melrose UU Church, where we are now. And I'm tri-chair with Beth Yergrau and Paula Morotz, who Paula is sick, so she can't be here, but she would. And we have 10 members on our team, on the racial justice team, and I'd like them to stand. Just some of them are here, not all of them, and I'd like them to stand and just let us know. I want to say to this team, we have 10 members, that it is a dynamic and wonderful team. So they're all here to help you tonight. All right, a little bit of logistics. There's a bathroom right out here on this door to the left, and there's 2 bathrooms right straight across the parlor if you need that. And then after this presentation, Amber has been willing to stay, and we'll have some snacks and some juice, and you can ask her more questions. The format for tonight is conversation format. Amber and I talked this week, which is a treat to meet her before. We have our presentation, and we talked about what would work, and we both thought conversation. So it'll be a conversation of me asking Amber some questions, and then after there'll be question and answers. Microphone will come out into the audience, and you can ask Amber your own questions. All right, and Amber is willing, we're recording this for people who aren't here. And Amber has some film clips. So if anyone wants a recording of this tonight, Beth is passing around a clipboard, and you can put your email on that, and we will send you a recording of tonight, all right? So the clipboard will be coming around with a pen, right? Oh, okay. Some people just walked in. Anyway, okay. It is my honor, and I'm thrilled to introduce Amber Payne. Amber is a strategist and a storyteller. She is creating bold content that drives conversation. Currently, she serves as Chief Experience Officer of the Rocky Mountain Public Media in Denver, Colorado, which she will be relocating this summer. Most recently, she was the publisher of The Emancipator. It was a multi-digital publication exploring solutions to racial inequality and inequity. In 2015, she created and launched NBC BLK. It was a section of the NBCnews.com dedicated to elevating conversations around Black identity, social issues, and culture. She spent a decade at NBC Nightly News, producing breaking news and features. Currently, she lives in Melrose with her husband and 2 young children who attend the Lincoln School. So I am so thrilled to have Amber here. Come on up, Amber. Okay, let's start our conversation.
Thank you for that welcome.
I want to ask, what brought you to Legacy Media?
What brought me to Legacy Media? So I started out at NBC Nightly News, which was a real honor and privilege to start at the network in New York City, where I thought that I was going to be doing graphic design or editing. That was really my interest, but I learned about what a producer was. So I got an internship at NBC before my senior year of college, and I went to the University of Virginia, and I had no idea that it could be a real job to ask people questions about their lives, to research important topics and put it all together in a story in 2 minutes that could be broadcast to 8 million people around the world. And really help people to learn new things, to inform them, maybe entertain them. I just didn't know that that was a real job that I could do since I didn't have a journalism major. But I really learned that by hard work and just throwing myself to the fire, and being a quick study and being up for anything and willing to take any job. I found it, incredible, and I loved New York City, and I knew I wanted to be there. So I also took it very seriously being at Legacy Media, knowing that this is, the first draft of history, visually, and how that's just such a great responsibility to have accurate facts, to talk to the right people, and to frame a story in a way that did it justice. So I think that's where, that responsibility of Legacy Media really comes in, and I really learned, being, one of the few black producers in the room, just how I needed to speak up more. So there was an incident, or an instance, I remember one day that my executive producer, there was some story that we were considering doing, and she was looking around, and it was, it involved a black celebrity, and she said, "Oh, Amber, well, what do you think?" And I thought, well, she's just asking me because I'm the only black person in the room. That's not really fair. But I came up with something on the fly, thankfully. And then I thought about it later, like, well, you know what? I actually really need to have a perspective. If there are stories about, the black community or so-called black issues, I want to be able to speak up about them. I want to be able to frame and shape the story and raise my hand for the story, because I want to make sure I feel a great responsibility to make sure that that story is told right, because historically, Legacy Media hasn't gotten that right. And I think I look back at some of my old stories that I had put together at one point, and I even seeing, little things like what image is used when you're talking about immigrants. What image is used when you're talking about undocumented immigrants? Why did we always have to see the aerial shot of somebody running across the border? That's not the face of undocumented immigrants. There's I did a story about, it was really about black women and their achievements, and in running small businesses, and education, and actually, outpassing black men. And I look back at some of the way that was framed, and I could see that we didn't get to explain why. Why were black men disadvantaged in that regard? What about the history of extreme policing and incarceration, mass incarceration? How did that impact them? That wasn't in my story. So I think the challenge of being doing the evening news and telling 2-minute stories is you can't always get everything in, but it just raises a question, but it is our responsibility to tell that complete picture and not kind of skew things or frame things in a way that really doesn't tell the whole truth.
That sort of jumps to my question about, was your voice listened to? Were you welcome? Did they say, wow, that's a great story. Yes, I want you to cover these different images of immigrants or black men. Did you experience any pushback?
It wasn't necessarily pushback, to be honest. It was just kind of sometimes a lack of importance. And there were many stories that I worked on or pitched, and I always wondered, will this actually make it, or will something break in? You're always dealing with breaking news, and what is the story everyone's talking about, and that can bump your story out of the show. It could be 6:25, and you go on the air at 6:30, and you see your story is moved out of the rundown to the bottom, and you're like, what happened? So I think it was more about feeling like the stories I was producing around black communities didn't have the interest or attention. And I remember one particular meeting, I had this story that I felt was very important to me and millions of people. I had interviewed Peggy Loving, and if you know of the case of Loving versus Virginia, that's the case that made it legal for interracial marriage in Virginia. My parents got married in Virginia. My mom's black, my dad's white, and I got to meet Peggy Loving and meet her children, and there was, this amazing documentary that had come out. You may remember it, where they found this footage of them from, a life documentarian, and it was really, we had a great interview with Peggy, we had this great footage, it just was like a perfect story. And it was in the show that day, but it just was kind of not really talked about. It was sort of, not in the rundown that day. And it was not in the rundown for that day. It was moved to the bottom by our news meeting. And, I was younger and a little more hesitant to speak up at the time to say, well, what's up with that? What's up with my story not being in the show? And it was a white male senior producer who said, hey, wait a second, well, what about that story? I read the script, it's really good. And suddenly it became of interest, and it had the attention. And I was so grateful to him for using his power and privilege to just redirect attention to something that he knew was a quality story. And I think that was just an example to me of, number one for myself, just, hey, you've got to speak up for the things that need to be there, that belong, and really fight for these stories. And maybe even sometimes explain to people, why is this so significant? Why is this so important? And, because there's a soundbite from Peggy in the story where she says, I just want people to know that everybody, it's because of my parents that they can marry anybody that they want. And she's tearing up, and it's, it's such a universal statement. So I think I learned about trying to make the case to people who, don't look like me, don't have the same experiences as me, to help them to understand maybe the universality or just the impact on the greater community of the kinds of stories that I was, putting together, because I didn't want them to just be considered, okay, it's a black story, or it's a feature story, it's about something that, that could go tomorrow, that's an afterthought. Really trying to make the case so that people have also understand the historical significance or cultural significance of something. So I felt it was more, I didn't get pushback, it was just more passive dismissal. And if no one said anything, it probably just everything would just keep going as status quo, and it just took certain people being willing to say something, to push back, to stand up, to say this is important because.
You must have had really good stories for them to notice. So that brings me to the question of, now with the Trump administration's DEI policies, those stories are being buried or erased. So how, as a digital media news person, are you seeing that day to day, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's so sad. It's so unfortunate. As I was doing some research to talk to you all tonight, I came across something that a friend of mine wrote for a publication called the Nieman Lab, which the Nieman Foundation is here at Harvard, and I was honored to be able to do a journalism fellowship there. But every year they have these predictions they make about what's new in media for the next year, and I can't say it better than my friend Delano Massey said, and Delano is actually the head of Axios newsletters. He lives in Atlanta, but he said, legacy media has shown for 200 years it won't do what it never has. If journalism is the patient, the condition is chronic relapse. When the country's foundational truths surface, racial, historical, or structural, newsrooms retreat and coverage collapses at the very moments honesty is required. Inclusivity in coverage, priorities, and who newsrooms reflect has always been a weather vane for America. The external climate doesn't stay outside. It walks in with leadership and culture. And when the headwinds shift, newsrooms revive a more than 200-year habit, abandoning the foundational story of this nation. So,
I've been told to hold the mic up
Oh, okay. All right, no problem. So that to me, it's really about, this is the cycle, and it's an unfortunate cycle that if you're a journalist of color, you're kind of unfortunately used to. So, you know, you have the 2020 racial reckoning, and then the newsroom reckonings, and then everybody wants to cover these stories. Everyone wants to hire journalists of color. And now that we're in a new era and a new administration, and there's kind of business and political priorities, you see these publications pulling back, including, as you mentioned, I did get to found and run a section of NBCnews.com called NBCBLK. Well, there was NBC Asian America, NBC Out, NBC Latino. These were reporting outfits that were covering communities in a different way, in a unique way, and they've done away with those editors. They sort of just tag stories and place them on these pages. So, yeah, a lot of outlets have been canceled. You know, there were race and justice reporting groups at CNN, at other major outfits. All of those people laid off. So it's you also just see it in how people are treated. You know, I know some of the White House reporters, the black women White House reporters, who have been spoken to so horrifically by the president. And you see that, and that kind of just trickles into the attitude towards and the support of some of these outlets. So it's unfortunate. There's a lot of, you know, black newspapers are in trouble, community newspapers are in trouble, and it's very scary. I can't even end this question on an up note besides supporting your local community newsrooms.
Thank you. I know that must be hard. I mean, I can't imagine being silent so quickly within a year or two, you know. Talking about community news, Melrose used to have 2 newspapers, and we lost one of them, and that was the one that actually reported news in the community. So now we have more of a free paper that comes to every household delivered by mail. But it doesn't really have news. It's just reporting on sports with the high school, and just reporting on things like this, you know, events and what's happening at the library with the police. And I'm concerned of when you said support local community news. How could we do that here in Melrose, for example?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is literal money, literally funding, paying for news. And, you know, we talked a little bit about this, how now there are many reporters and journalists they're starting their own Substacks. You can read most of them for free, or you can pay to support them. You know, do you know who the community papers are? Do you donate to them, even if they are free? There's public media now. I'm in public media. I'm at Rocky Mountain PBS, but you know, here from BUR and GBH. So there's certainly financial support, but there's also ways to volunteer. I know that having just joined this PBS station, there's like 700 volunteers, and it's like a huge network of volunteers. It's sharing these stories. It's reading something and sharing it. You know, there's all these ways to engage, to attend events, to, especially with public media and community media, there's more of an open door to talk to us. Tell us what you want to hear. Like, tell us what we're missing. Give us ideas. We'll actually take your ideas and explore them. So I think I was able to work a little bit with the Bay State Banner also, which is, you know, the black press of Boston. And it's a great paper, and they need help. They need funding, or they need, if anybody here likes to copy edit, they need copy editors, they need just, they need volunteers. So all these community papers, there really is an effort to kind of to revive community papers across the country. There are different efforts, and it's like, it just feels like a trickle in the bucket sometimes. But I think, at this point, it's a la carte as to how we're getting our news. None of us are watching the 6:30 news right now. That used to be like where you had to be, because you're eating dinner and then you turn on NBC, and it's totally changed and shifted. So, subscribe, share, like all of those things do add up, and actually dialoguing with your community media producers.
Thank you. So we can go to our community paper and report about you. And well, we should do that. All right.
A shout out to one community, the Melrose Messenger, Ellen here.
Is Ellen? Oh, Ellen, hello. Good. I'm so glad you're here.
Another community journalist among us.
Yes, thank you. You're doing a great job. Going to, well, I guess you just sort of answered my question. I was talking with Amber this week at Cafe Nero, and I was saying, I don't go listen to the news. Even I was a PBS NewsHour junkie for years, and now instead of listening to PBS, I often read Heather Cox Richardson and Robert Hubble and Timothy Snyder and The Bulwark, and I'm getting my information. So sometimes I go listen to the PBS NewsHour, and I've already heard analysis before so it's really interesting to all these Substacks. Do you think, with Indie legacy media being owned by a few billionaires, can be changed in the future?
These billionaires are they're not going to stop buying up these papers anytime soon. It's like, it's such a criminal strategy that is almost shockingly, like, how is this possible? I mean, even in Denver, there's about to be a very big takeover, and everyone is just, it's just going to wipe out an entire newsroom. There are more, so I think that's where I continue to look at, like, these individual creators and seeking them out and supporting them. And even if it's not financially, it's reading and sharing them. But yeah, the media landscape has completely changed. And which is also, there are really great people who are just doing their own thing, who it would be great if they did work for a community paper. These community papers need those independent creators as well. So I don't know, that's just kind of one of those industry conversations right now about, the authority of, and where anyone's getting their news, but especially where our younger audience is getting their news. And I'm definitely concerned about that, in terms of just like, there are standards and practices, and sometimes there are creators who they're getting their information from these legacy sources, but they're just sharing the news to their followers, and hopefully they're getting it right. When I was overseeing The Emancipator, we actually had a strategy that was a social first strategy, where we would usually report on or give analysis on a topic on Instagram first. And we would write our take and produce it for Instagram, and then we'd produce it for the website, because our Instagram audience was larger than our website audience. But because our team was small, we would source Instagram creators who might have a really good take. Okay, the movie Sinners came out, and somebody has a really great take on what that says about race and society, and we don't have the time or resources to do our own. We would work with that creator to platform them on our site, but we would also fact check what they said. They're giving stats, they're talking about they have these references, and we would, we had a process to do that. So, that's how we approached platforming those creators to give our audience that social first, person who, because people just, it's like your friend. You want to just explain it to me in real words, explain it to me, and I'm an Instagram fan, so I know that I can get on there, and my algorithm now serves me. It served up Sherilyn Eiffel explaining, the latest voting rights issue, and Kerry Washington talking about redistricting in Louisiana. That's just where we are with like the celebrity and influencer culture reporting, and I'm not mad about that if it's somebody who has
The facts correct.
the facts
right?
correct and has the audience.
It's almost like a real new creative way of getting our news, isn't it? And we'll see what happens. But we're in transition. I want to move to another personal note, more personal. Many of us here at the UU took the Unpacking White Privilege class and Jubilee 3, which was an immersion in white people understanding what privileges we have. And I learned about the talk that African American parents give their children, that African American parents have to, well, why don't you explain what the talk is? And my personal question to you is, how would you talk to your children now in this climate?
Yeah, the talk is traditionally known as that talk that Black parents have with their kids in order to keep them safe in this world, whether that's about policing or about how to behave in school because you're going to be singled out as the one who's the troublemaker, or just as a young woman, and kind of you're going to be the one in that group that they're going to look at first. And I don't really think that me and my siblings really got the talk, because it was the 80s and 90s, and it was like the Benetton colorblind society, also just in the faith that we were raised. It was just very it's multiracial, it's multicultural, and my parents did specifically tell me they didn't want us to feel like it's because of your race that this happened. They didn't want us to dwell on that or lament over it. And I think they were trying to help us in that way, but it kind of, wasn't really maybe the best approach. I think there could have been a measured approach there, especially I have had conversations with my brother where he's said that it took him to until being an adult man in his late 30s till he really understood what was going on. Why was he the one always getting in trouble? Why was he the one, kicked out of school when his friend, did the same thing and didn't get the same, repercussions? And it brought him to tears to kind of realize that so much later in life. So it really is, it is a critical conversation, and I think certainly more parents and multiracial families are having it now. With my kids, they also have, they are really a multiracial makeup. Their dad's Filipino, I'm half Black, half white. They could be so many different, you can look at them and they're gonna get the what are you question that, I did get and still get. And so they are, they're children of color, but I'm also have to let them know of the privilege they have as, lighter skinned people of color, which I know that I also have. I know that people see me and treat me differently, than my mom when she was young, just that's a fact. And I think that's something that I feel like I probably have started to have that conversation with my daughter, just about that. Conversations around colorism, but I really have experienced it from my daughter, of just that there's something in the there's just something in the pop culture universe that just, even at a young age, is messaging kids that white skin, blonde hair. I mean, for my daughter to tell me she wants to look like Elsa, and to tell me that she's made those statements, you know, as a 3-year-old, it's like, what am I doing? Like, what have I done wrong? You know, we try to have this positivity about brown is beautiful and black is beautiful, and how do I really get this messaging in? But it's really all around them, and being the one who's different in a room. So, you know, I had talked to her just about that, about finding power there in who she is and what she looks like. And I know that I'll have that talk with my son when the time is right, that, you know, even though you are not what people are going to wonder what you are, and who knows what you're going to look like in 10 years, but like as a brown boy, you know, here are some things you need to look out for and things that you need to watch out for. And also you need to, I want them to also know, like, you need to look out for the friends that you have that have darker skin than you, because you are both people of color, and you don't leave them behind. I think that is messaging that I've, you know, really started to tell my daughter, to kind of look around the room and read the room, and how are kids playing and who's including who. So it's definitely, it's an ongoing conversation, but the talk, like I was telling you, is a talk that everyone can have, and everyone actually is having in their own way. Did you want me to talk about that?
So in our conversation about the talk, there's something white people need to talk about to their kids, and Amber came up with this Instagram that she put out with the Emancipator, so she's going to share this with all of us.
Yeah, and just to set it up for you, hit play, Rhea. At the Emancipator, we did a series on the talk, because we heard from one of our writers, and he was an Asian American writer, and he was basically talking about the talk his dad gave him growing up. And my co-editor, we were thinking like, oh, yeah, he got the talk. Like, everybody has their own version of the talk. And, you know, white people have their version of the talk. And, you know, we found this writer. She's a professional writer, and she had kind of gone viral for this story that she told about her version of the talk. And so we actually put together a whole series, which, you know, if you've put your email down, we'll send you the link to the series, which was an Edward R. Murrow award-winning series, I might add. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And, where we had writers, disabled writer, 2 queer parents, queer black parents writing about their version of the talk, you know, the South Asian, the Asian American version of the talk, you know, all these different versions of what that looks like. So this is our Joanna talking about, you know, she did it as a letter to my white sons kind of video essay.
Remember when I saw that thing on your phone? I was next to you on the couch while you were scrolling social media, and I saw something pass that caught my eye. It was a historical photo, and it looked innocent enough. You scrolled by quickly, liking nearly every post that passed, including this one. It was a historical photo of Hitler. But it wasn't just of Hitler. It was a photo in favor of Hitler. You guys had no idea. After that, your Explore pages weren't populated with the goofy memes and videos that middle school boys seem to love. Suddenly there were memes and videos I can only describe as white nationalism light. It was content designed to introduce kids to dangerous ideas, like Holocaust denial, the myth of the Great Replacement, and other overt white power politics. So I intervened. I had to. The idea that you, my kind and thoughtful boys, would even inadvertently do something to further bigoted propaganda terrified me. After all, racism and other forms of hate don't thrive because of just a few extremists. They thrive when white people decide bigotry is someone else's problem to solve. As your mom, I'm here to tell you that bigotry is your problem to solve. It's our problem to solve. See, there are really bad people trying to trick teenagers. especially white boys, into believing things that hurt others. They'll use scare tactics about women and babies being in danger in order to trick kids into being afraid of immigrants or people of color or the LGBTQ community. They'll digitally alter images and outright deny historical facts to make kids believe that the Holocaust or the enslavement of trafficked Africans weren't as bad as we've heard. They'll trick kids into thinking they can be heroes by standing up for white people. But they're all lies. They're lies that inspire kids to do harmful and even illegal things, like what we saw in Charlottesville and on January 6th, or maybe even commit mass murder, like what happened in Buffalo. Many of these people learn their hate online. That's why I've been so involved in your social media, and it's why we talk about racism and hate so often. I wanted you, my sons, to be prepared to outsmart them. And now that you're a little older, I want to make sure you know how to fight against them too, because we can't let hate win. We have to fight for a nation where everyone has the same opportunities to thrive, to raise their children in a nation where every individual is equally valued and protected. What could be more patriotic than a nation where everyone is equally free?
So this really touches me because I have a son who's grown now, and he's 32, but I never had to think about having that kind of talk with my son because white nationalism wasn't as visible. And my heart goes out to parents today who are raising sons. And I'm thinking of my grandson who's 5, and having this kind of talk with him might be it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much.
Sure, and I think, and that's just it. It's about, right, I mean, your son didn't get that messaging, but what's the messaging to this grandson? And when's, how do you begin with that? When is the right time to have certain kinds of conversations? There are so many good books now. There are just so many books that are children's books. I'm talking about children's books that explain a lot of these complex topics, and I'll include that in the resources. A particular, creator, I guess, who every week has a roundup of books, and it might be like around autism, or it might be around just explaining neurodivergence that they have, or it might be something around race, and just kind of, not the run-of-the-mill few books that I feel like we had.
Let's hope they're not banned.
Right, yeah.
Thank you. That resource would be great. Yeah. That would be great. I'm just, what's the time, Beth? Great, thanks. So I have a few more questions, but we've covered a lot of them. So Amber is a documentarian and her husband as well. And I was thrilled to find out that she has made and produced a lot of documentaries. And so she was telling me about them. And would you share with us the documentaries you've made? Because we would probably want to share them here in this community.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always happy to talk about that. So yeah, my husband, Rainer, and I, which we both were at NBC News working on different programs, but that's where we met. We started a little production company called Tilt Shift Media in, I think, 2015, 2016. And the first documentary we did was about the Harlem Children's Zone. So this is in Harlem, and it's founded by Jeffrey Canada, who is a dynamic, charismatic leader. I'm seeing some nods of people who know him or have seen him speak. Memorable. He famously was also in a documentary called Waiting for Superman, because he said those very words. We're not just going to be here waiting for Superman. Like, we're taking this on to save our kids and save our communities. So we had the privilege of profiling the organization and kind of doing a film about their history and their legacy. And what we like to do in our storytelling is give, we could do a nice little story about the Harlem Children's Zone, and here's how they started, and here's some clips from back in the day, but we actually told a story that gives you the history and context of what was going on in Harlem, what was happening in the 70s and 80s, the lock 'em up culture, like the policing, the over-policing, the drug epidemic. That's what contributed to Harlem. And also, why was everybody up there? Is it because perhaps they weren't allowed to live in other areas of the city? So just explaining the context that why was this needed? And Jeffrey Canada explains the model as to how they developed it and how they grew it to what it is, which now it has a national model that's being used around the country. So that's a film called Harlem Rising that we're really proud of. But I think I have a trailer from a different documentary we did called Avenues of Dreams, MLK Boulevard's Avenues of Dreams. So this was an idea that I had when I was a producer at NBC, and I kept having this idea about a story about the history of MLK Boulevards. There are more than, I don't know, I think it's probably in the trailer, like 1,000 streets named MLK across the country, and unfortunately, a lot of them are in more disadvantaged neighborhoods. And imagine that, for Martin Luther King's dream, his last campaign to be poverty campaign, and for that name to be associated with these streets that are associated with crime and violence. There are jokes about it. You don't want to go over there. You don't want to live over there. There's been controversy over communities fighting against having a street renamed Martin Luther King Jr. And that's in the last 10 years. It's not like super old news. So I've been intrigued by that for a long time, to find a way, like, what if we told the story of these different streets all over the country? And I finally got the opportunity when Comcast accepted this idea to kind of go to 2 different communities. We went to Baltimore and St. Louis to tell a little bit about the history of these cities and the naming of them. And I'll let you see the trailer, and then I'll talk a little more about it.
We're looking at on Martin Luther King and in Baltimore. By far, this is not by accident.
MLK's demise was a slow burn. It's still occurring today.
People are just doing the best they can, the best they know how.
These street names, they're memorials for the sake of affecting.
Martin Luther King deserved more than what this country has given him.
So yeah, that's just a snapshot, but I think, while we wanted to explain about redlining and how these communities have been erased, in St. Louis especially, entirely paved over for the university there. People sequestered into smaller areas that just didn't have, it was, inhumane, basically, to shove people into certain areas and expect them to thrive and expect them to have, the resources and the housing. And people, wonder, well, how did this, fighting those assumptions people have, well, why do they live over there? They could move. Well, they couldn't at one time. It was illegal. There are racial covenants that were created to keep people out of white neighborhoods. And there is literal paperwork. There's a paper from the house that my dad currently lives in Virginia. He gave it to me that there was originally a racial covenant around that area about who could live there. And so Baltimore and St. Louis were interesting twin cities to tell this story in, because they both had very significant racial reckonings and uprising, with Freddie Gray's killing and Michael Brown, and just what transpired after that, the activism, the people who engaged. And so, for all of those issues and complicated parts of the story, we were really asset framing that community. And what we did is we found people in both communities who were working to turn things around. That there's a young dynamic leader in St. Louis that is organizing young people. There's a younger woman in Baltimore who's buying up blocks in West Baltimore, abandoned places that are falling down, buying them up, renovating them, and selling them back to community members at a fair value. You know, this is not for people to come and flip it and just find cheap housing. So finding these stories of people who are trying to change their communities, that's how we told the story. So you still had that history and context. And so I think that's what you know, kind of coming back to just media and producing media and the importance of asset framing a narrative instead of kind of, you know, the poverty porn and the problems. You know, that's still an issue in legacy media. And that's still an issue in media where you see either headlines or visuals or just narratives that are just leading with, they're not leading with humanity of a place or a person. And, you know, so that's something that we've tried to do in our work. And I'm pretty sure you can watch Avenues of Dreams online for free. Just watch some ads. It's just 30 minutes. And Harlem Rising is also, I think, on Apple and such. So.
We'll definitely probably be showing some of your work here. You talk about the context. The more I learn, the more I realize when I understand context, it really helps me understand the issues in a new way. So thank you for that work you're doing. Really important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning I'm constantly learning. I think that's what I love about my job is there are so many things I did not learn. I didn't know these things. And when you know, even there was a relative who, you know, they were talking about, you know, redlining. Wait, what's redlining? It's not something he ever encountered. And it's like, okay, let's talk about this. And, you know, I think that's something that we all can do as we kind of think about what can we all do. It's those kinds of things. It's giving people context or facts.
That's sort of what one of our missions of the racial justice team. We want to educate ourselves to more context and understanding so we can be more effective. How about if we open it up? I'm sure many of you have questions. So Beth will come around and give you the mic.
Thank you so much. So could you tell us a little bit about what your Denver experience is going to be, or what you're set up to do?
Yeah, sure. So bittersweet to leave Melrose, number one, I have to say. This has been an amazing community, and we've made such good friends, but I'm very excited about this opportunity with Rocky Mountain Public Media. So as Chief Experience Officer, it's kind of a combination of overseeing the content. They have a journalism team. They have 2 radio stations. One is a jazz station, which has really deep roots in the Latino community. The other is a hip-hop station. They do a lot of community events. And the organization has a small civic engagement team and programming, you know, choosing what's turn on PBS, what's on the air. So I'm overseeing those content teams and also just thinking about the audience's journey and is there overlap between different audiences? You know, what do we know? What if the hip hop station's audience, they really like documentaries? So how do we kind of find that experience where they're engaging with our brand on the radio, but they also know to, you know, go to our app and that we have a history of hip hop documentary that, you know, might service them. So those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to kind of create connections between, and there are some, you know, as you might imagine, there are silos and people work in their silos, and, you know, how do you break down these silos to have people collaborating around events and producing work or producing opportunities, you know, with the underwriting or, you know, advertising team that really make sense and that are not just happening in a silo, in a vacuum, but can happen in a better way if people are co-creating, who, you know, we're all in the same building and we're in the communications business, but it just, you know, people don't always communicate, right? So that'll be some of what I'm working on. And my first big project across the organization is that we have a forum with the candidates for governor, and it's really centered around Colorado women and women's, I hate to say women's issues, but issues that are important to women. There's some original polling that has been done by a couple organizations, and so that's something that I'm excited to lead as like a very cross-team effort to pull that together. So it'll be kind of some of those big events and other ways to bring content events to life in a way that makes sense for the audience and is audience-driven and audience-informed. That's what I was talking about with that feedback loop of, hey, what stories do you want to hear on the radio? What do you want to read in your paper? Write to that editor, write to that reporter. Their emails are there. Call the station. That's what we are. I feel like that's what public media tries to live by, and I see it. I see that there are team members who they get the daily newsletter and they write back, and then the editor writes them back. There's kind of there's communication. There shouldn't be like this wall that's up. So also trying to think about how do we also take insights from our audience and actually make sure that we're reflecting, the audience and growing our audience. So all those things, I think that's my job.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was interested in your thoughts about the influence of artificial intelligence on the news media. That's kind of a broad question, but just whatever thoughts that you have on that would be interesting to me.
That is a broad question, but it is a good one. So on the one hand, I worry about, with AI, I kind of worry that it feels like everybody's using it, right? But how is it being used to report stories, and is it not being fact-checked? I mean, I think there have already been some instances where people are using it to just write entire stories, and I think that's sad. Like the craft of writing, the craft of headline writing and research is getting shortcutted, and I'm glad. I mean, I used to have to transcribe interviews that were coming in and type them up as fast as I could, or I'd be staying till 9 o'clock transcribing like 2 hours of interviews, and it was just ridiculous. Like, we need AI for that. We need AI for things that are productivity based, and I do use it to kind of keep things organized or to brainstorm. So I think there's those aspects that are good. I think on the technology side, I just see cases where it's helping to build new systems. I see some things we're doing when it comes to analyzing our audience and trying to understand who they are and their habits. That's where I see the most positive aspect, and I worry that, for young people who are learning who want to be reporters and writers, you can't take those shortcuts if you really want to be a good reporter. But I can see where the temptation is because you're trying to get things done. So it's a huge topic and something that I'm trying to keep tapped in on, because if you have to, or you're going to get left behind on it.
Are there any other questions?
I was really interested in what you had to say about sort of the more community-based media and journalism and connection, because it feels like sort of at a more higher national level, things like AI or and influencing, and also just like you said about things. Money and people controlling certain aspects of our media. How do you see the community-based work growing and sort of being able to really be there to feed people at that level? I feel like that's so important to get to kind of blossom and bloom kind of grassroots and people every day working together, right? As opposed to like the people that have this power that is really challenging to circumvent.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, you're making me think of just how, because of technology, accessibility, everybody can be a creator, or anyone can start a website, and you know, you all could start a local, like you could start a website, and it could be reporting on racial equity in the Melrose area. You know, I think I like the fact that there's like a democratization where, you know, or maybe it's not a website, but like, what does the community need? What do you all want? Is there an aspect of wanting to share certain things, or kind of a clearinghouse for certain information? Is there a newsletter? I'm sure you all have a newsletter. I mean, I think those are ways of connection points, creating digital connection points, because there's the in real life, in person aspect, which is extremely important, and then there's that keeping that connection point after, and what does that look like? I mean, there's a program that Rocky Mountain PBS has, where it's called this ambassador program. The goal is to have an ambassador in every county, and to kind of bring them together virtually to talk about issues in their community. And you know, our civic engagement team is present, but it's really meant to kind of you know, be its own ecosystem, and it's not supposed to be driven by us. It's supposed to be an opportunity for people to find that connection point. I think about WhatsApp. There's I can't remember the name of the publication, but it's geared toward Latino communities in Arizona, and it was called like Cafecito, and it became something that it came out of COVID. Hey, we're sharing resources, we're sharing this. And then it really grew into community conversations and everybody getting together in one digital place and feeling connected. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, but you make me think of just these other ways that affinity groups can find kind of creative or fun or just engaging ways when you can't be in person to kind of have that moment to share. Yeah, it's almost like creating your own counter programming that works for you.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, snack time.
So I am so grateful that you could be here tonight, and thank you for everyone for coming. And we have refreshments out in Parish Hall, and if you want to talk to Amber in person. And we're really sorry you're leaving Melrose, because it would be great to continue some kind of learning from you, and so we will miss you. And I just am glad that we have this opportunity before you leave.
No, thank you for having me. Honored to be invited and to speak with you all, and feel free to connect. I'll send you some things. We're connected, so if I see something that I think you all need to know from Denver, that you all really need to know about, I will be sending it your way, Karen.
And I love the fact that PBS does conversation. Like, I'm thinking of WGBH with Marjorie and Jim Brody. That they're very much conversation and community. And I love like how they do that, because it's very personal. It's about Boston, and I don't know if that's around as much as, and maybe that would be happening in Denver too, where you'd have, but let's continue the conversation. Thank you.